Hey guys, it's Jambros, and I am back with what should be my last loot guide for Phase 5 of Classic TBC. This will kind of be the big comparison video, compares how good the contested physical DPS items are for each class and spec. A little late is around something like week 7 of Sunwell right now, in the Wrath of the Lich King beta just dropped, but figured it was worth doing if you still want to compare or decide who gets the next piece if you're still working on clearing the raid. This is a loot Prio guide because it's made from math and doesn't take into account your guild's social atmosphere. This is a game about playing with your friends and sharing the items that drop. You don't deserve to have an item just because it may technically be better for you than somebody else. So remember to have fun and share. Since this covers all the physical classes, I use lots of different sims for this, but they're the same ones I used in my previous Phase 5 loot guides for each respective class. The sim settings and group comp will all be the same from simulations in the per class videos done previously with the specifics shown here. Before we get started, I want to show the format and how this is organized to make it easily understandable. The top left here is the contested item being compared. Underneath that shows the classes that are currently uncontested in this slot, not necessarily this item in particular. Right and center show the rankings ordered by percent DPS increase as well as the raw DPS value. Warriors and rogues are separated into two categories, with and without warglaives. It's still pretty common not to have both, and the large DPS difference between having and not having was too large for it not to alter some items' percent DPS increase by a significant margin. Now the left side is labeled as entry set, and the right side is exit set. These are comparisons made using different gear sets. Entry set is meant to represent your gear level when first entering Sunwell, aka in Black Temple, Mount Hyjal BiS, so those numbers are how much of a DPS upgrade this item is right off of the bat. Exit set is the opposite side of the coin. It represents you being in nearly all Sunwell BiS, and how much of an upgrade this item is over your next best item available in Phase 5. So let's get started with the Helm slot, and the classes that have an uncontested overall best item in the slot, and it's Feral Druid. In full BiS, Ferals will use the Tier Helm as the fourth piece for the 4-piece Tier 6 bonus. Although I should note that using the Tier 6 shoulders for the 4-piece as opposed to the helm is very close. The Coif of Valeria is BiS for most of the mail and plate wearers. The plate helmet off KJ just isn't as good as this one. A couple notes here that this item may not be BiS for Ret, depending on what gear set you ended up using. This represents using the armor pen set. If you went for the haste set, then the leather helm is BiS for you, which is next up. Enhancement Shaman could also go either way. The final DPS difference in your exit set is only like 2 DPS. Hunters actually go from last to first from entry to exit with this item. Reason being is how high Hunter damage scales up at the end of Sunwell, and the relative strength of Cursed Vision of Sargeras, which you would be replacing with this helm. In my opinion, Hunters benefit the most overall. They have no good second option here. Warriors, both Fury and Arms are next up, but still behind Hunters because they have a good second option in the Crown of Anastarian. Ret and Enhance bring up the rear because a leather helmet remains a very strong option, and don't even gain a massive DPS increase in the entry set. I would move Ret up here in this priority list, probably behind Hunters, if the Ret is going the armor pen set route and has already obtained the Leggings of the Immortal Night. The second BiS helm is the leather one, the Duplicitous guys. Only truly BiS for rogues, but I did include Enhance as it is virtually just as good for them as the mail helmet. Here it's shown as a total DPS loss for Ret, but only in an armor pen gear set. With the haste setup, this is BiS and is a linchpin item. It contains all the hit you need in a single piece for them. In my opinion, it really depends on if the Ret in consideration has already received a piece required for either their haste set or their armor pen set. If a haste set piece has already been gotten, then I would prioritize Ret for this piece first. Otherwise, Rogue benefits the most here in both entry and exit sets. Enhance gains the least here and has the added benefit of being a good second option being available to them. There are no uncontested neck pieces, and I originally wasn't going to include this jewel crafting crafted neck, but the pattern has turned out to be much more rare than I thought and is in very high demand. The plans for this from Trash really amount to a whole best in slot item drop. Of course, you can only wear this item if you're a jewel crafter. If you're not, the next best item is compared next. As you can see, this choker is overall BiS for all physical classes, but may not necessarily have the highest overall damage output for some if you did something like, say, drop jewel crafting for enchanting and got your ring enchants instead. If you're not a jewel crafter, most likely your BiS is the Clutch of Demise. That goes for everybody except for Enhancement Shaman, which goes uncontested here. Surprisingly, the Elder Shattered Sun Pendant of Might seemed out slightly higher for them. This item is a more modest upgrade for most and almost not at all for Feral Druids, a spec that haste is typically very bad for. A real outlier here is how big of an upgrade for Ret this is right out of the gate. In my opinion, well, there's a lot to unpack here. First, the most worthwhile class to take jewel crafting and the hardcore aim choker are warriors, both fury and arms. If you're able to obtain the pattern, it's likely also worth it for rogues and hunters, generally equally. Feral druids, enhanced shamans, and rets, I would recommend not even taking jewel crafting, making you ineligible for the armor pen deck. For the Clutch of Demise, the largest upgrade here is for ret paladins. After the ret paladin receives this, the play is definitely hunter next, with fury warriors not far behind. The last three, rogue, arms, and feral, all have comparatively strong BT high jewel pieces, which devalues the Clutch of Demise by a good amount. The shoulder slot features the most uncontested in Sunwell. This is the most common place to put a 4th tier piece for the 4-piece bonuses, and that goes for hunters, rogues, and arms warriors. It's also very close for feral druids. The only contested shoulder item are the Demon Thieves shoulder pads from the Iridar twins. This information looks a bit different, and there are a few things to note here. Feral is separated into 4-piece and direct replacement on entry set. Feral is a unique spec in this regard because in BT best in slot, you would still use Wolf's Head and replacing shoulders would break the 4-piece. This means breaking your 4-piece for this item would be a 31 DPS loss, but not including breaking the set bonus, it's actually a 41 DPS increase in the item itself if you were able to snag a new tier piece. Exit sets here show really tiny differences. Feral is so small only because it includes the possibility of getting the leather helm. Enhance is virtually equal with the mail shoulders, Mantle of the Golden Forest, and for that reason I would not suggest them taking this item even though it is a large upgrade in the entry set. There are 2 other plate specs here, and Ret comes up on top in the exit set, but if you ended up using the haste gear set with a leather helm instead of the armor pen gear set, then the plate shoulders, Pauldrons of Berserking, are equal to these leather shoulders. In my opinion, feral druids benefit the most from these. They have by far the highest DPS upgrade right off the bat with minimal other needs to keep the 4-piece bonus. Using this item would mean they wouldn't need the leather helm either, thereby freeing up another piece for presumably the Ret Paladin, which I would recommend as second for this item. While a decent upgrade, the Pauldrons of Berserking are a very viable second option for Rets. This is an absolutely tiny upgrade for Fury, and not even an upgrade at all for Enhanced, who should most likely use the Mantle of the Golden Forest. There's only one new physical DPS cloak in Phase 5, and everybody wants it. This is really more of a reward item, but the results are mostly straightforward. There is a little nuance to this item, and no matter what, you just replace whatever you're wearing with it and don't even think about it. There is not even much difference between Sunwell entry and exit sets. In my opinion, the top 2 options that benefit the most from this cloak are equal: Combat Rogues and Fury Warriors. A close third would be Ret Paladins. It falls off a little bit from there, which honestly is kind of relative as I consider this a reward item, and the overall DPS differences are minimal. Feral and Hunters next, Enhanced Shaman and Arms Warrior bring up the rear. The Bladed Chaos Tunic is best in slot for every single physical DPS spec, but the actual DPS differences here are slightly deceiving. Very often the next best chest piece is a bind-on pickup crafted item, meaning you need to be a leatherworker or blacksmith to equip it. That's why so many of the specs on the exit set side show small numbers. The next best item is crafted. If you're not a leatherworker or a blacksmith, the next slide will show updated comparisons. One special note here is for feral druids. Again, this breaks the 4-piece bonus. I ran out of space to include the item comparison with the 4-piece still intact. Notice anyway that this is still a 12.7 DPS upgrade. That's right, this item is actually still an upgrade for feral druids, even if you're breaking the 4-piece bonus of your tier set. If you include the 4-piece, this number is bumped up to 86.6 raw DPS and a 3.19% DPS upgrade, shooting it all the way to the top in first place. These are the crafted options available for the chest slot. Let's start on the right with the exit set. This column shows how much of an upgrade the Bladed Chaos Tunic is for the next best item in that slot, not including the bind-on pickup chest pieces crafted through leatherworking or blacksmithing. This changes things quite a bit. For example, arms rocketed all the way up to first if the hardcore battle plate isn't available to them. The left column is a little bit different. This shows how good your crafted option is for an upgrade in an entry set. For example, Fury Warrior with Glaives is listed at number 1 with a 59.56 DPS increase, upgrading from BT Hygel gear to the Hardcore Battle Plate. There are a couple notes here for that left column, first being that Feral and especially Hunter really don't have good crafted options. For Feral, this drops the 4-piece bonus, but even if you keep the 4-piece, it only bumps it up above Rogues. For Hunter, the Carapace of Sun and Shadow is better than Embrace of the Phoenix, though it really hardly matters. In my opinion, Feral Druid is a clear-cut number 1, no matter what, and everything else is much harder. Obviously, a blacksmith or leatherworker may have better options, but overall, I feel blacksmithing has sort of lost its appeal. Leatherworking is still good for drums, probably most often taken by the Enhancement Shaman. I prefer Ret probably the least. While a middling option overall, they have 2 other options if a blacksmith and the plate chest, War Harness of Reckless Fury, is actually pretty good for this spec, while it is not so much for a warrior. Combat rogues are surprisingly low, but only placed ahead of the enhanced because that spec is the most likely to get Carapace. Fury Warrior and Hunter are great options as well. This item just seems far and away Feral priority. Combat rogues and Feral Druids hold an uncontested spot for the gloves, because they will both use the easy-to-obtain, bind-on-equip, crafted item, Gloves of the Immortal Dusk. The only gloves that are contested will be the male Thalassian Ranger Gauntlets. The plate gloves are not a contested item, and are in fact worse than the leather-crafted ones for everybody. These gloves are overall a very minor difference in an exit set. They are practically interchangeable with the leatherworking crafted gloves. There is one anomaly here, and that's the entry set for Hunters. It's a bad first upgrade for them. You'd be forced to drop Curse Vision, a strong item for Hunters, and ruin your hit rating. After getting a few other pieces of gear, it gets much better. In my opinion, this is probably one of the least meaningful loot decisions you could make, but if I had to pick, then Hunters and Fury Warriors would be on top. Realistically, the answer is whoever hasn't gotten the leather-crafted gloves yet. BM Hunters gain the most overall at about 5 DPS, but Fury Warrior gained the most initially from obtaining it. Ret Paladins gain the least, literally 0 DPS, and should only get it if they're too broke to buy the leather gloves and you can't get these things to stop dropping. Leggings of Immortal Night may be the most in-demand item in Sunwell. This is BiS for everybody, but in varying degrees. Note that this is another case of Feral dropping 4-piece on the entry set due to Wolf's Head. Regardless, this is still a DPS increase. Yes, equipping this item is worth breaking your 4-piece bonus. If you include the bonus, Feral actually moves all the way up to number 1 on the entry set upgrade list. Hunter would also fare better if it were not for the 4-piece bonus restrictions. For the exit set, plate-wearing classes have a really good second option, the Fell Fury leg plates, putting them towards the bottom of the list here. Warriors will also need to have the Storm Rage Signet Ring to make up for the lost hit rating to use this plate option. In my opinion, Rogues take the number 1 spot by a significant margin. The DPS difference between Rogues and all the other specs is just too large. After Rogue, Enhance, Hunter, and Feral all make terrific options. This is a Massa upgrade for all of them. It's worth noting that Enhance and BM Hunters have an in-between item. The Starstalker leg guards, which can be used until you get these. Feral's otherwise best option is used to tier legs and moving around off pieces. Warriors are next on the list due to the availability of a good second option. This would make it seem that Ret Paladins are at the bottom for this piece, but this is a linchpin item in their Armor Pen gear set. If they've already attained another big item, say the Coif of Valeria, these become much more valuable as this is the only source of hit rating needed for them in the Armor Pen set. If that's the case, I would actually move Rets just behind the Rogue spot. Another all-spec BiS item, the Band of Ruinous Delight, although not quite so impactful as the previous ones. The exit sets are pretty straightforward in terms of DPS gain, but in an under-geared entry set, there are a couple notes here. Feral is undervalued as it needs more hit elsewhere to make it work, and Ret is also undervalued as you'd be dropping that old reputation expertise ring for this. This ring would be much better for Ret once you farmed the Shard of Contempt from Magister's Terrace. In my opinion, the total overall damage gain on the 2 warrior specs is the most impactful for them than any of the other specs. This ring can be a pretty large upgrade for them, while it is often pretty marginal for the rest. Hunter, Enhance, Ret, and Feral all gain about the same amount, and I'd put Rogue at last. Storm Rage Signet Ring and the Hardcore Band are particularly good for Rogues, which closes the DPS gap and how good this ring is for them. Blackened Naaru Sliver is the last of the all-spec BiS items. While the raw data is all presented here, there are a few notes and asterisks with some of it.
First to note is how big of a difference this makes for Fury Warriors with Glaives. Glaved Warriors benefit 40 DPS more from this trinket than Glaveless ones. There's also some inaccurate modeling in this data, particularly for Rogues and Ret Paladins. Sliver is BiS for Ret Paladins in a haste gear set, and has to be min-maxed to get maximum value out of it, changing when you use your abilities and things like that. Therefore, you'd expect to be able to get a bit more damage out of this trinket in full BiS. It was also calculated slightly incorrectly for Rogues, a small error in the spreadsheet. It's actually a few DPS higher, not very significant. While all specs gain damage against low armor targets, Rogues gain the most so here, particularly with Glaives. In my opinion, this trinket does the most for a Glaved Fury Warrior. Even if a set of Glaives hasn't been gotten yet, if you're still farming Illidan for it, then it's probably still worth it for the Fury to receive it first. Not far behind are BM Hunters, followed by Rogues and Arms Warriors. This trinket is a much more marginal upgrade for the last 3 specs, Feral, Ret, and Enhance. They all have very close trinket combinations that are relatively easy to obtain. Now that we're onto the weapons, most are lightly contested, but only one spec is truly uncontested, because nobody else uses a Feral staff except the Feral Druid. Anyways, this is BiS for you Ferals, so just pray it drops at some point. Probably the most hotly contested weapon in Sunwell is the Kil'jaeden Fist weapon, Hand of the Deceiver. This is BiS for all Enhancement Shaman and is a BiS stat stick for all Hunters. Note that Hand is only best in slot for non-glaved Orc Rogues, not human. Otherwise it would be Muramasa, which is still second best for Orc Rogues. While Fury Warriors gain a lot from this weapon compared to their Phase 4 weapon, it only actually ends being up about 10 DPS higher than, believe it or not, the Dragon Scale Encrusted Longblade in the main hand. In my opinion, Enhancement Shaman gain the largest amount from this weapon. That's not really an opinion, more like a fact, and the Enhanced should always get this first. It feels a little dirty to have a Hunter as second, even if it's just a stat stick, but the math checks out. Non-Glaive Fury Warriors and Rogues have very viable second choices, not even including a Glaive that may drop for them. The offhand weapon, Mounting Vengeance, drops off of trash in Sunwell, and only 2 specs can claim it as BiS. Just Enhancement Shaman and Fury Warriors without Glaives. Note that this is very close, but not quite BiS for BM Hunters in the offhand, along with Hand of the Deceiver. Pretty straightforward, this is a bigger benefit to enhance again. Hopefully you get a few of these though, they'll be useful even if not overall BiS for some physical DPS. The two-hander, Apollyon from KJ, is best for the two-hander specs, Ret and Arms. Very solid upgrades for both. In my opinion, Arms benefits more than Ret from this weapon. That said, it's more of a reward item, hopefully you get 2 eventually anyways. The strength of Torch of the Dam mutes the overall damage upgrade for Ret, and Arms Warriors armor pen capping against low armor bosses is a problem. Upgrading to Apollyon is an overall damage increase and drops armor pen in the process for Arms. Thordal. Gee, this is a close one, guys. This really is a pretty marginal upgrade for Hunters. Only more than a 200 DPS upgrade. I hope you're lucky enough to give all your Hunters this, and then give it to the Warrior or Rogue with a set of Glaives so they can clip through your legendaries at once. In my opinion, I don't know why I'm comparing this. Give it to your most deserving Hunters, then once they all have it, give it to a Warrior or a Rogue for the laughs. For a little more serious talk on ranged weapons, the Golden Bow is more debatable. This is still a bigger DPS upgrade for Hunters, since they'll actually use it instead of as a stat stick, but Thordal is still a huge upgrade from this, and the other specs actually gain solid DPS upgrades. Note that for Hunters, this is a 43 DPS upgrade over the Brutal Gladiator PvP weapon, so it will be an even bigger upgrade if you don't have the rating for that weapon. In my opinion, I still think all Hunters should receive this weapon first. It's just too big of an upgrade for them. Thordal has a low enough drop rate that it's really just not guaranteed. Once all Hunters have either Thordal or Golden Bow, Fury, Arms, and Rogues can start receiving these. It's about the same of an upgrade for all 3. I want to finish up with the new tier tokens, Boots, Belt, and Bracers. These are best in slot for everybody, however you're not just competing with the physical DPS for them. You're competing with all classes and specs that are on your token. The Conqueror token is the only uncontested token, as it has only 1 physical DPS spec on it, Ret Paladin. All of these pieces have expertise on them, absolutely massive for Ret Paladin. I don't have numbers to compare against with Warlocks, for example, but at least 2 of these should be a Ret Prio. Starting with the Protector token, this token has the most physical DPS specs on it. The Bracers seem to be particularly well itemized for Fury and Arms Warriors.
Hunters have the smallest initial upgrade, but in a near BiS set, it's a massive DPS upgrade. These bracers for Enhanced Shaman do have expertise on it, just like all of their other new tier pieces, and even accounting for expertise overcapping, these in particular don't provide as big of a benefit comparatively. This is a pretty similar case for the belt. BM Hunters really ramp up in full Sunwell gear, and Enhancement Shamans seemingly benefit the least. The boots, however, are a bit different. Enhanced get the most from this tier piece compared to the rest. BM Hunters still get a ludicrous amount in Sunwell BiS. In my opinion, everybody should get at least one piece at first to allow more gearing opportunities elsewhere for off pieces. Personally, I like Warriors for bracers, Hunters for belt, and Enhanced Shaman for boots. Tier pieces are pretty common in Sunwell, so I wouldn't sweat this too hard. The last of the tokens is Vanquisher, which has Rogues and Feral Druids. This is probably the least contested overall token, so this gear should be relatively easy to obtain. Feral Druid DPS probably is the worst tier token in Sunwell, which is unfortunate. This is likely because Blizzard tried to make these tank pieces as well as DPS pieces, and ultimately Feral DPS suffers because of it. Feral does still need all of these though to make way for the stronger off pieces, while still keeping the 4-piece bonus. The belt is a particularly poor item for Ferals out of the gate, not so much for Rogues. It does, however, end up holding a lot more value once other pieces of gear are gotten. Same goes for the boots. Literally a side grade for Feral, although providing flexibility for other gear slots. These boots are truly massive for Rogues, however. In my opinion, the pieces are overall stronger for Rogues, but Feral needs at least one piece off the bat to get their gearing going, and the bracers are their strongest new tier piece. The belt and boots are too strong to ignore for Rogues. And that's it. That covers all the contested best in slot items at the end of Phase 5, and the last of Classic TBC. I hope you enjoyed watching, and hopefully learning a thing or two about your class, the class your friends play, and how to gear them. Soon, I'll be moving on to Pre-Patch and Wrath of the Lich King. If you have any other questions, please drop them down in the comments, or come watch me on Twitch and ask me there while I hopefully kill more of these bosses and get some more of these items in there to drop. Thanks, guys.